future of healthcare has arrived. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are transforming the practice of medicine and improving patient outcomes. This is Smarter Healthcare with AI. Conversations with Dr. Hassan Tetteh as he shares insights into the healthcare of tomorrow and how we can help create it today.
I'm back with Amy Brown, the founder and CEO of Authenticx. We've been discussing how her company is analyzing millions of recorded patient conversations to uncover key insights into what's really driving frustration, care dropouts, and poor outcome. Now, Amy, when you think about where you could go with this technology and with this platform and with this mission, it seems to me like it's just scratching the surface. But where else do you see the opportunities to deploy this ability to listen to the patient in the health ecosystem writ large?
Yes. The vision is for organizations across industries, really, to start viewing their unstructured data as now accessible and as the most important source of insight that can not only drive business outcomes, but their customer outcomes. I think it's very easy for providers to point to payers, for payers to point to pharma, for pharma to point back to payers. We had a consortium last year where we brought all three of those pillars together and said, hey guys, we're listening at the macro level. We're listening to all your interactions. We can't point fingers anymore. We have to start getting aligned on incentives. And to be honest, I think there's an opportunity to take these voices to regulators to say, look, you guys, you talk often about the voice of the American people. Let us play it for you directly. And let's talk about what are the sources of the biggest friction points within our overarching healthcare ecosystem. We know that the United States has the most innovative healthcare tech and solutions, but our accessibility, our healthcare equity, and our administrative expense is worse than any other country in the world. It's insane. If we're not using this data to drive at those problems, then we're just allowing ourselves to throw up our hands. And what the impact I would ultimately love to make is that this data is used to actually change the systems that are in place today, so that we truly are getting at the administrative costs, certainly, but also to recognize that the administrative experience is having a direct impact on the clinical experience. That is what we need to do. And I know this data source can help point the way.
I can speak firsthand as been on both sides of that, the administration and the provider side, and and dare I say even the patient side. All of those things are inextricably connected right now, for better or worse, but they certainly are. So, something that you said just intrigued me. When you had this opportunity to bring together these various stakeholders who, if you look at them sort of holistically, they seem to have mal-aligned incentives. I mean, everyone says we want to help the patient, but when you kind of look at their actions, it seems like, one's going north, the other's going west, the other one's going south, and someone's going northwest. So if you are listening at the macro level across all those stakeholders, pharma, industry, administration, the providers, and of course, listening to the voice of the patient, where have you seen the opportunities to sort of build some bridges of insight and understanding across those silos?
Well, in the consortium, just getting folks in a room and around a table to workshop some of the problems, just the act of doing that allowed some of the guards to come down and the villainization of each other to reduce, which I think that in of itself was a healthy step. But that was in this tiny, minuscule, this small group of individuals. But I can see the potential, right? If we scale that, and to bring regulating partners to the table as well. I do think from what we hear from all of these millions of conversations, there are opportunities to align around some of the administrative components of our healthcare system, like prior authorization, for example, where there is simplification that could allow the friction points to be reduced and everybody to have a happier experience, all the stakeholders. And I think there's many examples of that. If we don't get our incentives aligned as a healthcare system, then we're doomed. And I think this this conversation data plays a very important role in kind of pointing out the reality of what consumers are facing. And it goes beyond like a research paper or, this lobby over here and this lobby over here, because we're literally listening to the consumer base directly. And you can start to see the interconnectedness and the responsibility that we all bear to we all have a part to play in simplifying and making it better.
And, talking about the regulators, have they been sort of invited into this conversation, like, formally, besides just in this consortium that you brought together?
Yeah, so I've been making some attempts and some small headway. I have had some initial conversations with CMS, and I'm working towards continuing that relationship. We have developed a data-backed research story we call Crushing Complexity. It's about a 45-minute presentation where we've zoomed out and shined a big bright light on what we're hearing. And we're trying to get that story in front of as many people as possible, including regulators.
Wow, that's powerful. And how you've leveraged AI to do that? Is that an integral part of it, or is it tangential, or is it central?
Well, it's the research engine, right? Because if you don't have highly accurate AI that's able to listen to the totality of the data set, then you're back to like tiny sample sizes and trying to make conjectures, right? But because we have technology that allows us to analyze and find the root causes and issues at scale, we're able to speak with more credibility and confidence on what the issues are. We're also able to use AI to pinpoint those individual conversations where there's powerful voices that need to be amplified.
Wow. Well, I'd like to shift gears just a little bit, but really amplify what you just said, which is amplify the voices of the customers. And, going back to 250 million conversations, that's just a wealth of information. It's a wealth of data. Congratulations on achieving that. And the insight that you must have gained from these conversations must be incredible. So if you think kind of holistically beyond the insight and the information you were able to present to the organizations themselves, and you think about where healthcare is heading, and sort of under the context, or in the context of smarter healthcare with AI, what trends are you noticing? And I imagine you must have some trends with all of those conversations across geography, but also across time. When you think about where we are, sort of in this time and space of advanced technology, AI that is, sort of at the forefront of everyone's conversation right now, and an incredibly complicated, like you said, healthcare system that has so many challenges. And yet you hear the voices of the people that are engaging with all of this, right? All of that. They're at the center of all of those paradigms kind of colliding. What are the trends that you're seeing? What are those conversations giving you insight about? What's coming, what's the future hold, and what are people sort of displaying in terms of what their thoughts are?
Well, what I see in kind of the consumer population is, despite industry and technology's efforts to throw kind of new tech at a problem, there's still a lot of desperation from the consumer. It feels like it keeps getting more complex. I mean, you and I have probably had experiences where we call a 1-800 number, they send us to a chatbot makes us download an app, then we have to fill out and create an account in order to just get our answer. And according to that company, they were opening the digital front door for us, but it ended up being, this extra complicated process. So I don't see consumers cheering us on for all of our innovation. And the trends I'm seeing at the macro business side of healthcare, organizational side of healthcare, is we've got this convergence of different pressures that are creating a tension of values. We have a value, we like to say we have a value of putting the patient at the center. We also have a competing pressure to make care more affordable, and we think technology is going to help make it more affordable. We have this tech pressure that's like, hey, we got to we got to innovate. AI has taken off. And if we're not an organization adopting AI, and I see a lot of organizations like throwing AI at a problem without understanding what outcomes they're expecting to achieve from that technology. And it's just creating downstream problems. So what I see is this kind of tension of all of these competing pressures on the healthcare system. And I think there needs to be a little bit more discernment and thoughtfulness around how should we think about AI as solving a problem? What do we want our patient experience to look like? Do we want it to feel human? Do we want it to be in tech enabled? What problems can tech actually help us solve? And where do we want humans to supplement? There's not enough thought being put into that. And I think there's an expectation that AI is going to solve all of our problems. And the reality is it's not. We're still left here as humans to make sense of it all and make judgment calls on it. And so I'm just seeing a great need for very thoughtful conversations around that. And I'm hopeful to be a part of those conversations and to help all of us make sense of the path forward.
And in this path forward, you being at the center of really capturing a conversation and this listening, which is so critical. Kind of going back to being a Doctor 101, one of the things I love to tell students that I teach now and residents that I engage with is reflect on my time as a student. I'm always a student. I think all of us in medicine and healthcare are always constantly learning. But one of my professors way back when in internal medicine would tell us about, this evaluating and engaging with the patient, the encounter, when the doctor is seeing the patient, that very critical one-on-one time. And when you think about that experience, and again, I've been on both sides of that equation, the doctor as a thoracic surgeon, but also as the patient, with a very grave and ill disease or problem. My professor said, if you listen to the patient, truly listen to the patient, they'll tell you the diagnosis.
That is what my dad always told me growing up.
Isn't that amazing? And you know what? It's been so true every single time. And I dare I say this as a cardiac surgeon, where we use all kinds of technology. I mean, you can imagine what you have to do, and you witnessed this firsthand with your dad. Being a heart surgeon, you're opening up the chest, you're stopping the heart, you're doing very, very delicate and very complex procedures on the heart, this very, precious organ, and then you're restarting it and all of the things that have to happen for that to work well. At the heart of it, that's what's happening. But that whole dynamic started with me as the doctor listening to the patient to understand what was going on. I listened to the heart and I got a bunch of different images and studies and tests, but those things were only to confirm and sometimes just rule out other things, just to make sure that what I believed was going on from listening to the patient was in fact the case. So it seems to me, and it dawns to me, that I can't help but think that with this experience that you're having, where you're listening to the patient, you're listening to the clients, you're listening to the people that are seeking help, that you are learning about the diagnosis of what ails us and what the problems are. And you certainly have articulated many of them. How are you able to look forward and see how, this listening, this exercise of listening, this work of listening is helping, besides just informing the leadership?
Well, first of all, I love your story. It really speaks to the very human experience that we can't lose sight of that sacred interaction between one human and another, and how critically important that is to our lives and our quality of life. And I love your story. I'm so glad you're teaching that message. What I see and what I hope for with the use of listening at scale, that's what we call our work, is using AI to listen at scale. What I hope is that we're bringing a way for leaders to now credibly rely on data and use their own ears to ignite their own empathy as a way to drive systemic change in our healthcare system, to reduce gaps in care, to reduce the chances of people falling through the cracks and being on a pathway on a discharge plan and then falling off that discharge plan or what have you. And for the system itself, the different verticals within the healthcare system, to start seeing the similar problems that are happening within those verticals and start to work together. And I do think it's going to take regulators to also be a part of that listening to help understand the challenges from each of those verticals perspectives and from the entire consumer experience. And so I really see this as a movement to changing the system that we have. Our country has done a great job in the last 2 decades of collecting through EMRs and health exchanges all kinds of clinical data, right, that can follow a patient. But if all you have is lab data, claims data, diagnostic data, but you don't understand the lived experience and how the perceptions, the experience of how that patient is going to behave with their diagnosis or with their insurance plan or with whatever their lived experience is, then you're not able to actually predict the outcome. It's going to take both, right? To truly drive outcomes. And that's what I see the great hope of this technology can do.
And one of my leaders, a great mentor of mine that I had is sort of my last tour in the military. He was in charge of leading our organization in AI, Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. And he talked about how AI would be a tool. And clearly that's how you envision this. You're using this tool to be able to listen at scale. And he talked about how it would augment, us in our respective roles. It would help accelerate our work. And it will help to automate some things too, so we could look at that, sort of description of this tool as we were articulating this to others, especially novice AI folks. And this was before ChatGPT, where now everyone knows about it. So you think about those 3 sort of areas and domains and your technology, certainly you're augmenting the listening capability of an organization, but also the individual. So as these folks that are receiving the calls and listening, the call center person that's taking the call, do they get any feedback from what you are gaining in terms of insight? And because you're clearly augmenting their role, because as you said, they have 60 calls and, there's sort of a pressure to get, to the next call so that the other person is not waiting as long and to sort of resolve the problem. But in doing so, I imagine that there's some things that are lost, right? Because you're listening, but you may not do so much listening as you're just hearing and trying to get on to the next one. And as you and I know, hearing and listening are 2 different things.
Absolutely. Yes. So we have a suite of models, AI models that are designed to listen to the healthcare representative side of the conversation and to give them an analysis and assessment of their soft skills, their accuracy, their compliance, and how they handle the interaction. Call center leaders certainly use that type of product to help augment their human personnel development, personnel management. Agents, call center agents have their own dashboard and their own, ability to interact with our product, to agree, disagree with how AI has scored their side of the conversation. But I think that even more important to giving feedback to the agents they often are the lowest paid part of the workforce, right? And yet given the most responsibility of being that front face, that voice, that brand representative to the customer population. And what we find is 80% of the problems that are coming to agents are actually born at the leadership level. They are problems that are process related. They're problems that are tech related. They're problems that are the responsibility of leaders to unstick, right? And so I think the biggest way we help agents is we elevate their experience, again, with data. It takes them out of the anecdotal, escalating up. And now we're aggregating the problems that they have to navigate every single day and helping leaders see where they have a role to play in making that customer's experience better hopefully reducing volume into the call center, but also the frustration that those call center agents have to navigate each and every day.
Right. So you're giving them a way to not only improve their own engagement with the patient as they, take another call and another call, they're getting that feedback. But as you said, you're not only amplifying the patient's voice, but you're amplifying the call center agent's voice as well, because you could collectively show that, hey, even though those call agents are receiving the complaints and receiving the vitriol and receiving the anxiety and anger or what have you, a lot of that is, as you mentioned, process and systemic, that the leaders have responsibility and oversight over, and they can now, take this wealth of data and say, hey, see, we're receiving the brunt end of this, but you guys have oversight over these very critical things to sort of address. That's just fascinating. And I guess I have to ask you a question. It's just something that I was wondering about, because this work seems so important, and I just know how much I get when I really take that time to listen to the patient. And it's incredible, because sometimes it seems as if it's taking a long time and we feel like we don't have enough time to listen. But most people are able to tell their story in just a few minutes, like their whole story, like everything, like, from beginning to end. And when you listen and take all that time, this is what I share with my students, is that it actually saves you time on the back end. Because if you're not listening and they don't get to tell you their whole story, you'll kind of start ordering tests and making referrals and doing all kinds of things, only to find out later, after all those things have failed or haven't given you the insight that you needed, that had you just listened to the end of the story, they would have said, yeah, I'm here because of this and that, but this is really what's bothering me. And you'd have given them the space, you'd have saved all that time. So it's this efficiency that's built in to this very natural human act of just listening, right? And giving people space or respect to tell their story and express what's bothering them. So I just think that if you're doing this at scale and listening at scale, which is a beautiful way to really, depict what you're doing, what has brought you the most joy and satisfaction from this work?
At the macro level, seeing C-suite level leaders who have never truly, ever taken a call from a customer, or don't regularly have interface with the customers that they're entrusted to serve, to see them hear their customer's voice for the first time and be so moved that they, change course and change their own kind of strategy and priorities, has been such a gratifying experience. I remember one call where we were showing some pharmaceutical company leaders the first look at their customer data, and we played the first montage, which was illuminating, some of the heartbreak that was pouring in from this patient population that these call center agents were handling. And after the end of that montage, we were getting ready to go on to the next slide and talk about the next report. And the meeting got stopped by this senior leader. And he said, I just need to take a pause. And he said, I have never heard the voice of my patient before. And he turned to his colleague who was responsible for the call center. He said, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I have never fully recognized what your team is dealing with on a day in, day out basis. We need to provide them respite. We need to provide them more support. We need to thank them more. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And we've seen that over and over and over again. And listening at scale really leads to empathy at scale. And empathy at scale is really back to our mission, helping humans understand humans. When we understand each other well, then we can make changes that actually make the difference, right? And it all starts with listening to understand. And that's what we're really focused on.
That's very powerful. The things that bring you joy, you've expressed. What brings you optimism as you look into the future of leveraging this very powerful technology that's allowed you to, elevate the conversations and and listen at scale, but elevate the conversations of the patients, and then thinking about as fast as technology has been moving and is moving and will move, and probably appreciating that what we have right now is probably the worst technology we'll ever have moving forward. It's just going to get better and better and better. And knowing that and thinking about how you have used this tool to do what you do at scale, what brings you optimism as you kind of look ahead into the mission of Authenticx and where your organization continues to move and how you pursue the mission?
I have a lot of optimism that the thought leadership that's trying to lead in the space of responsible AI, intentional AI, the leadership that's in place trying to drive patient-centered care, that those two things will converge, those two missions will converge, and we will have, I believe in our ability to develop and use this technology in a way that elevates the human condition and doesn't just detract from it. Certainly with every new major milestone in technology, there's a buzz and there's a hype and there's a fear associated with how it might change the landscape of our society. And I have a lot of optimism that we will make good decisions, and that solid judgment will prevail. And I'm excited to be at the forefront of that. I got to be at a conference earlier this week where I heard one of the world's leading ethicists on AI speak. She speaks before Congress. She speaks to the EU. And I just was so impressed by her leadership in the space. And it makes me feel very optimistic that, we will get to a really well-grounded use of thinking of AI as a tool to improve our human condition.
A tool to improve our human condition. That's a very elegant way of putting it. I've been talking to a lot of technologists and of course, technologists that are trying to bring their wares and their solutions into healthcare. And of course, talking to a lot of my colleagues that are in healthcare, they're not necessarily technologists, and there is a fear and anxiety. And where I found sort of those intersections of those conversations most optimistic and sort of aligned with what you just espoused is that I think those that are looking at how this is just to be applied, which is a tool, are looking at technology, this type of technology, and certainly what you're doing, as a way for us to actually be more human in our delivery of care. Now, that sounds a little counterintuitive, but I think you have just illustrated how intuitive and how natural that actually is. It's because you've had this technology that's allowed you to, at scale, display and deliver this insight to leaders, to those that are engaged in the conversation on a daily basis. So when you get to 1 million times 10, a billion, when you get to like 1 billion of these patient conversations, what do you think you'll learn from that? You've hit 1 million, you hit 100 million, you hit 250 million, and I'm sure at each one of those milestones where you have all that insight, you've gained quite a bit of knowledge. When you get to a billion of these conversations, what do you think you'll learn?
I think that first of all, we'll continue to validate the sources of the root problems in our system, and I think we'll have reliable data source from which to bring some intel to the broader landscape of policymakers, decision makers within the healthcare system. I also think we'll hear the results of all of this innovation and what impact it's actually making, because conversation data is fluid. It changes with market events, world events, global events, local events, geographic events. And it's fascinating. I mean, we were in business during COVID and before COVID, right? So we got to see the rise and leveling off of COVID-related questions. And every time there's an event, the Change Healthcare phenomenon that happened a few weeks ago showed up across the healthcare ecosystem in our conversation data. And so I think what we'll see when we get to 1 billion conversations is, the impact on our decisions healthcare leaders. It's going to show up in this data source. I think of customer service conversations or these micro conversations. It's like the canary in the coal mine. They're the first indicator of what is impacting our society from a healthcare perspective. And what are those things happening in our systems, our world, our politics, whatever it is, that are showing up in the day-to-day lived experience of these customers. And that's why it's important that listening is not a one and done endeavor. It should be a systemic way of doing business, because it changes, and it allows, when we're listening ongoing, it allows us to be responsive in a much more proactive way than before.
Wow, that's wonderful. So Amy, I have to just say thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the incredible work that you do and for developing Authenticx and to have a mission to help humans understand humans. But, your work at taking these conversations and listening at scale so that we can, as a healthcare ecosystem, gather and appreciate and also deliver empathy at scale, I think is absolutely what we need right now at this time of great innovation and technology advancement. So this is so much appreciated, and thank you for sharing your brilliance with us on Smarter Healthcare with AI. I really appreciate it.
It's been a delight. I appreciate it.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Please make sure to leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.
This has been Smarter Healthcare with AI. If you'd like to find out how to bridge the gap between medical experts and tech innovators and discover how AI can make us healthier and more human, go to Tetteh.com. Smarter Healthcare with AI with Dr. Hassan Tetteh is a production of Forbes Books.